Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
You shake my nerves and you rattle my brains. Great balls of fire. Well, Tim, here we are in Kansas City, home of the Kansas City Lights.
What's that? Is it a new basketball team or something?
Oh, no, of course not. They're beautiful flashing lights that appear and disappear mysteriously at night.
Oh, that's right. Well, our guest tonight claims that she has seen them herself.
Well, she's not the only one. Look at that.
Ooh, oh my gosh, it's so bright.
Talk about a Kansas City star. Hey, it seems to be coming. It seems to be coming our way, Tim.
No. We better get out of here.
Well, what it's going to do? Zap us, swallow us up, perform medical experiments on anything, huh?
No way. I don't know. Let's just get back to the KCR studios in Las Vegas so our expert guest can tell us what's what. Come on, let's go.
I'm with you, pal, but great balls of fire. Whoa.
Hurry up.
Up. Here we are. We've landed.
About time you got here.
Well, I'm a little bit slow on the uptake. Those lights were like scurrying right behind me. Almost caught me. But I've always managed to outpace the lights, and I'm kind of an old ham when it comes to mysterious lights. Back in the 1960s, I spent some time in Brown Mountain, North Carolina, which is some great lights down there that are seen coming up and down out of the crevices of the mountain. And then when I passed over the Oklahoma-Arkansas border back a few years after that, there was the great Spook light, which I remember my old friend, the late Robert Lofton, Captain Robert Lofton, put out a little booklet on the Spook light, which I still have in my collection here. And then in our recent book, UFOs Deja Vu, we did a whole chapter on spook lights all over the world. We got the Marfo lights. We've got the Min Min lights in Australia. And then we had on a guest who had been an observer of the Hisselden lights in far off, very cold Norway. So, hey, when it comes to lights, they're the party lights, the red and blue and green, and a lot of other colors too, I think. Right? Okay. Enough of this. Let us get on with our program for the evening. Who are we going to be speaking with this evening, Tim?
Well, Tim, I'm very happy to introduce this first time that Margie has been on Exploring the Bizarre. So our guest is Margie Kay. Now, Margie is the director of Quest Paranormal Investigation Group and assistant state director for Missouri MUFON. She's conducted over 1,100 paranormal and UFO investigations, and she uses standard scientific investigative methods and equipment for research and relies on remote viewing to clarify what may have occurred. As well, she is a UFO ET experiencer herself and has had her own close encounters with UFOs and what she says, extraterrestrials. Now, Margie uses her natural remote viewing abilities to assist law enforcement, private investigators, and private individuals. Margie has been instrumental in solving over 50 missing person homicide and theft cases using her unique remote viewing abilities, which she has honed over the years with amazing results. She's also worked as a private investigator for the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, where she learned some of the normal tricks of the trade. Now, she's appeared on numerous radio programs and was the subject of an episode of the Hangar One television show, which covered her investigations in the Blue Spring Lights and an animal mutilation case in Missouri. She was also in a pilot episode of the TV show Strange. Now, Margie is also the author of the books Gateway to the Dead, A Ghost Hunter's Field Guide, Haunted Independence, and the Kansas City UFO Flaps. So, Margie, great to have you with us on Exploring the Bizarre.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, we got a lot of ground to cover here. Now, how long have Margie? How long have you been doing this? I mean, let's start out with the UFOs, because that's my main interest, being that I am Mister UFO. How far does your interest in the unexplained, as far as the aerial phenomena go?
Well, I would say my interest in paranormal started at a very young age. By age 11, I was studying everything to do with paranormal and UFOs. But my interest was really, really peaked when I had my own sighting in 1986. And I was in Seattle, Washington, and I saw definitely something that wasn't from Earth, along with my brother and my two daughters. So that really convinced me that there was something going on.
And what did you see exactly?
Well, we went out to see the Perseid meteor showers, and went out in the country, and we were laying back on my 1968 Mustang, looking at the sky, and all of a sudden this big white light came across the sky, and I assumed it was a satellite, but then it stopped. And then 5 more objects the same size, same brightness, followed along behind it, and then by the time the 5th one got to all the rest, it looked like they joined together. The instant it hit, the rest of them, they took off at a 90-degree angle at warp speed, and they were just gone in half a second. And so we just looked at each other and said, "Time to go." Got in the car and went home. So
what was the duration of the sighting?
Well, I would say it was at least 5 minutes, maybe longer.
Oh my goodness!
Because of the amount of time it took each of those objects to gather together.
And at what altitude are we talking?
High. I mean,
high.
Like I said, I thought they were satellites at first, but they were a little bigger and a little brighter than normal satellites. And when they all joined together like that and then took off at a 90-degree angle, I mean, it was just incredible. That type of maneuver would, a human couldn't survive that.
Now, were there other? Were you living in Washington at the time, or
yes,
on vacation?
Was.
Oh, you were living there.
I lived there for about 13 months.
Yes.
And then moved back to Kansas City. I'm from Kansas City.
Now, were there other reports at the time, or were you you and your group the sole witnesses?
As far as I know, we were the sole witnesses. I did go to a UFO group periodically, monthly, in Seattle, and nobody else had mentioned that they saw that. In fact, I think I started going to that group right after that sighting.
And so there had been. Well, I know, of course, we talk about the mysterious lights. We're going to talk about mysterious lights. You have the Yakima lights in Washington State, which is very near, or just right off of the Indian reservation there. In fact, I know they had, at one point, they actually had constructed a watchtower where people were coming and seeing the lights on a regular basis, and also taking photographs of them. We had, I think, a photograph in the book. Okay, so you were originally from Missouri. You were in Washington for a while, then you moved back to Missouri. Were you involved with the Piedmont sightings at all, or was that before your?
I knew about the Piedmont sightings in the 70s, in the early 70s when they occurred, because I first saw it on TV with Walter Cronkite. So since then, I've done quite a bit of investigations, and I actually spoke at their conference that they had in celebration of those events in 2013. And they had a huge conference with a lot of people attending, and I was their keynote speaker at the end of the evening.
I know on TV recently, out of the Travel Channel or one of these programs, they actually visited Piedmont, and apparently they've had a new wave of sighting there. And of course, I had been in touch originally with Hartley Rutledge, who had written a very well documented book on this flap that lasted, I think, for a couple of years, and were a lot of them were around bodies of water or a particular river.
Yes, especially Clearwater Lake. And there were UFOs seen going in and out of the lake, and UFOs underneath the lake moving along. They could see the lights under the water. And I recently found out that there is a huge cave underneath that lake with a huge cavern that goes back. They don't know how deep it goes back. The divers don't know. But that would be, and obviously they were coming in and out of that water. I've read Rutledge's work, and they did investigate it for, I think, 2 or 3 or 4 years over that time period. But when I went to Piedmont, I interviewed a number of people, and every one of them said that this has been ongoing since that time. It hasn't let up. It's just that people don't talk about it because they don't want the backlash. So they just don't speak about it.
Well, even for a while, the media may give a flap like this some attention, but then eventually they seem to lose interest in it. So the reports may continue to go on, but the public at large is not aware of it. Well, tell us a little bit about Bob.
Well, Bob is a strange one. He appeared over Kansas City and Independence, but it was seen by a group of people in Blue Springs in 2012. And a young man by the name of Robert Cover, who has gone public with this, was the first one to really notice what was going on. And in fact, his neighbors thought that he was peeping in their windows, that he was a peeping Tom. When he said, no, come out here and take a look, he was trying to look with his binoculars to get a better look at these objects. And what they are, it's really odd. It's nothing like the Joplin Spook lights or anything like that. These are very, very brilliant, bright objects that flash sequentially, and I've timed them at 1/3 second intervals in a clockwise motion. And it's always 3 colors, like red, blue, green, or red, orange, green, something like that. 3 colors, and there could be more than one appear in the sky at the same time in different positions. Up to 5 at a time have been seen. And I've seen that many at once. But usually it's only one. So this was, Robert Cover filed a report with MUFON. He also called KCTV5 News. And Dave Jordan was the journalist who was investigating. Dave gave me a call. He says, I'm going out there tonight. And I couldn't get out there because I had another case. And so he went out with his crew the first night. The second night, I went out with everyone. The whole neighborhood was out, and Dave Jordan was out, and his camera person was there. And we watched these objects, but he told us that the night before, he was very, very nervous. He never believed in UFOs before. He said the night before, they watched this one object for about an hour and a half, when all of a sudden, it dropped to the ground and then straight up again. Flew across the sky, across the horizon, and then back in a second. His camera woman grabbed her gear and jumped into the van and locked the doors and would not go back. So she wasn't there the next night when I was there. So when he explained this to me, I first thought I was just going to go out and see planets because of their descriptions. Because planets can look like they're flickering with atmospheric disturbance, of course. And they're also very bright. So that's what I was expecting to see. But after about an hour, these objects brightened as it got darker and darker. And one of them was flashing. So I have high-power binoculars I was using. So I'm watching one of them flash and go counterclockwise. And it was located in an area that I believe was over Lake City Army Ammo Plant in Independence, which is going to be significant. The other one was in the west and southwest, and I thought it was Venus. But when I pulled up my sky map, Venus was below the horizon. So I'm watching it with my binoculars. Everybody was suddenly focused on that one, and the cameras were on it. I put my binoculars up, and I saw not only the lights flashing, but also a metal grid over this object. So it was an object, not a light, not just a light.
Right. Well, in a lot of these cases, they're described like in the press as being lights, but then when you get down there, whether it's Brown Mountain or wherever, and you start studying it firsthand, like the lights in Norway, which have been seen since like 1980, they're really not lights; they're crafts in a lot of cases where these things you could actually see the metallic hull of the craft, and in some cases they appear to change shape right in front. They have this morphing effect where they actually appear to change shape in front of the witnesses.
Yeah, I believe that because other people would look through my binoculars and see something different. But they've been seen by hundreds.
Any attempt to communicate with them? I mean, signal to the objects or anything?
Yes. Well, this is even more interesting. One of our witnesses built a binary light board to communicate with it, and he was sending binary signals, and nothing happened. But then when he got his 1,000,000 candle power flashlight out while we're filming, he flashed it at it. It flashed back. This happened 3 or 4 times in a row. It was obviously flaring up in reaction to this light. So that indicated to me that this was a close object and some type of intelligence was operating it.
Yeah, we noticed that in England. I was there in the early 1980s in the town of Warminster, where they had a ongoing UFO flap for, I guess over a decade. And we were out there one night, and this object was overhead. You couldn't make out any real detail at it, but Arthur Shuttlewood, who was the editor of the local newspaper, went to his car and brought out one of these big torch lights and started flashing it at the object and gave it to me, and I flashed it as well. And every time we tried to signal to the object, it seemed to swing back and forth as if acknowledging our attempt to communicate. Now, I didn't know Morse code or anything like that, and it wasn't responding in that regard, but it did seem to be under intelligent control and did seem to be acknowledging our presence. So now, how often does Bob appear?
Almost any night that it's a clear night. In fact, it's out tonight. I saw it this evening.
Well, hello, Bob.
Yeah. Well, we call it Bob. That's short for beyond belief. And also because of that show, What About Bob? He was such a pain.
Yes.
This thing has been such a pain to me that that's why I came up with that name.
Well, now I know you do remote viewing. I mean, that's part of your interest. Have you ever tried to remote view the object?
I have a little bit, but I backed off from it because once I found out that Lake City Army Ammo, ATK, was interested in this and in keeping it quiet, they shut down the investigation with the radio station or the TV station, and they grilled the witness.
In what way did they shut it down? Did they go to the owner of the station and say don't?
They went to the station manager and told him to shut it down. Dave Jordan had done 2 segments on it, and these were in-depth segments. He was going to do a third one. In fact, he had filmed the third one, and he went in and they said, we have to shut this down, but he didn't tell them who did it. But I found out from someone else who did. So it's my opinion that this is not something extraterrestrial. It's more likely something of ours.
Now, any strange radio interference or EM effects?
Not from this. Now, one bizarre thing that is associated with it is laser beam-like lights that shoot across the sky. Either some type of a weapon or something else, but this has been associated with that object and seen by many people.
Do they seem to be aimed at the object?
No, they seem to be aimed horizontally, going across the sky. They're not coming down to the Earth, as far as we know.
Uh-huh. And how many how many people have seen this altogether, would you say?
Hundreds, if not thousands.
Uh-huh.
I get constant reports.
Okay, and you say it was in the press just a couple of times?
Well, it was on TV in two big segments, and then it was covered in lots of news reports online as well. But I think it seems that, first of all, we do have the media that will only pay a certain amount of attention to it.
Yes.
And, and then they're told to pull the plug. So it really should. I mean, this is as big as the Phoenix Lights, is how big this is. I've seen these things do bizarre things. They will also hide in front of planets and sit in front of a planet so you don't notice it. But I've been on sky watches where we'll watch something for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then all of a sudden it blows up to a huge, huge size and then moves down below, to the Earth, or shoots down and then back up, or just something bizarre. And a lot of people have seen this independently, and I've been on investigations where there's a lot of, many people together, and we see this happen.
And how about any reports of landings or contact?
No contact other than the lights. And I have not remote viewed and gone onto the craft or whatever these things are, because if it is military, I'm afraid they have the technology to know that I'm there looking. So that's why I'm staying away from it. Now, if it was extraterrestrial, I wouldn't hesitate going to look.
Are there is there any sign, though, of extraterrestrial craft associated with this at all?
Not that I know of. We do have a lot of sightings here in Kansas City, though. It's just a major UFO hotspot. It's just bizarre how many reports we get. In fact, I can't even believe I saw one tonight at 7:45 p.m. When I went out, and this huge, huge craft was flying about 3 miles away at very low, about 2,000 feet. It was much bigger than an airliner.
Right. Margie, let me have you hold it there, and we'll continue this when we come back from our bottom of the hour break. So stay tuned for more Exploring the Bizarre.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
This is Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight, our guest is Margie Kay. And Margie, unfortunately, we had to interrupt you to go to our bottom of the hour break, and you were telling us about a UFO sighting that you had earlier this evening. Why don't you go ahead and continue your story?
Yes, right on time for our show tonight. I saw this really, really large object, larger than a 747. It had multiple bright lights on it. There were mostly white lights with a red light. And I was in my car, so I couldn't grab my phone and take video. I was headed to stop somewhere to take video. Watched it for at least 10 to 15 seconds, and it was moving from north to south, and then it just disappeared, or all the lights were turned off, as if it just wasn't there anymore. I called my friend Jean Walker, who lives not far from here, and was telling her about it. She said she just saw it as well. She was outside, she saw it, and then it disappeared. So we saw the same thing, exact same time, from two different locations. And we've got some sky watchers out right now with our Casey MUFON group, and they're watching for it. So we'll see if it comes back.
So now, is the Kansas City area a kind of a continuing UFO flap area? I mean, the stories that you've been telling, some of the research that I've conducted prior to the show, seems to be a lot of activity over there.
There's a lot of activity, and there has been a series of flaps over the years, and I write about that in my book. But since 2011, things have really been hot. We have, a few less some years and then a lot more in other years. And it looks like 2020 is going to turn out to be a very busy year because of the number of reports that we're getting in. And it's important to remember, too, that not everybody calls in a report or goes online to report at the National UFO Reporting Center or MUFON.com. I wish they would, because it'd give us a better picture. But, for instance, some of our meetings that we have in Kansas City, we'll get, several people come up and say, oh, I saw this in the last month. And I'd say, did you file a report? No, they didn't. And I ask them to, but, some people just don't want to, or some people are kind of afraid to. They don't want anybody to see their name or anything. So, really, it's a small percentage that report, but we're getting a lot.
Yeah, I think it's something along the lines, for every one report, there's probably at least 100 other sightings, maybe even more than that. And I think that a lot of people, they just they have no idea how to make a report. They don't know who to call. A lot of people, they have no real knowledge about the phenomena. Maybe they've seen something on television, but when they do have an unusual sighting, it's just really outside of their safe zone, so to speak, and they're left gobsmacked by their sightings.
True. And some people won't even talk about it for years after I've talked to people who have been silent for 50 years, and they come up to me and say, I just have to tell someone this.
Yeah, well, all it takes is, one person, one family member that teases somebody about their sighting, and they'll never talk about it again. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I run into that all the time. All right, so now at the beginning of the program, I was reading your biography, and it states that you yourself, I mean, you've had UFO sightings, but you say that you've had close encounters with extraterrestrials, or at least unknown beings.
I sure have, and I would say I'm not sure what they are. Maybe they're interdimensional beings, but they were definitely not human beings. Mm-hmm. They were humanoid type. And one of the most bizarre and really my first serious encounter happened a few years ago. I was lying in bed, and my feet had been hurting me for at least 2 to 4 weeks. And I'd been to my regular doctor and my podiatrist, and they could not figure out why my feet were hurting so bad. Got to the point where I couldn't walk anymore, and I could only crawl. So I was lying in bed meditating, and I just sent the message out to, anybody who might be listening. If you'd like to come work on my feet tonight, please do. So I just lay there and fell asleep. The next thing I know, I feel this really sharp pain in my left calf, as if a long needle had gone in all the way to the bone in my calf. And it woke me up, startled me. I opened my eyes, and I saw 2 short, like 3.5, 4 foot tall gray beings standing at the foot of my bed. And one of them had his hands in front of my feet. So he was working on my feet. The other one was just standing back. And then I sensed that there was a third one to my right, but I didn't see it. Well, that shocked me. And even though I've been asking to see extraterrestrials my whole life, or other beings my entire life, nothing had really happened like this. I did have one other encounter, but not like this. Mm-hmm. And so here you are in your house with other living beings that have appeared in the house, and I'm waking up from a sleep. So I screamed, and they instantly disappeared. Yeah. I don't think they really disappeared. I think they disappeared from my view. because I had moved into this fear mode and lowered my vibration.
Mm-hmm.
Is how I think this works. So anyway, the next morning I noticed my feet didn't hurt as much and I could walk, and within a couple of days all the pain was gone. It was amazing. So I mean, there is proof right there that if you ask for help, there are some who are willing to help.
Mm-hmm. And probably their reaction was, well, here we get your call for help, and what do? You scream when we get there.
Exactly. Exactly. And I promised I wouldn't do it again, but sure enough, it happened again. I had a hernia, and I needed to have surgery, and I really didn't want to have surgery. And I did the same thing, ask for help, and I fell asleep. When my husband came up the steps and made a noise, and it woke me up, I opened my eyes, and I saw this gold being standing there with a big cranium, and his whole body was glowing this gold color. And he had his hands over my stomach when I saw him. Once again, I was shocked. I screamed. He disappeared, and my husband was standing there, and he said, what? He had no idea, why I'm screaming in the dark. And I said, please tell me you saw that. He said, saw what?
Oh.
So he didn't see it. But yeah, that was my second healing experience. Quite interesting. Then I had another experience where the ceiling in my bedroom opened up, and I saw an extraterrestrial, tall one with white hood on, and he reached his hand down, and I just reached my hand up, and the next thing I know, I'm on a craft, and he is showing me this LCD screen, what looked like an LCD or TV screen, and showing me the Earth from way back, watching the Earth. And he showed me an asteroid hit in Russia and then really caused havoc over 3/4 of the planet. This is a major, major event. Well, I posted that on my blog, what I saw. A few months later, that asteroid hit in Russia. And in some of the pictures, you see some of the, they all have dash cams on their cars in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So some of those pictures are on YouTube. The video, you can see this streaming white object that looks like a missile go towards that asteroid, and the asteroid explodes in the atmosphere. So I'm just wondering if that wasn't, why did they show me that? And then a few months later, that happened. I don't know.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that video.
I think we wrote that up, Tim. And didn't you work on a book, Coming of the Space Guardians? I think
that was an earlier event that had some similar video. What looked like to be some kind of interaction with a bolide coming close to Earth that exploded in the atmosphere before it hit. But I think that one maybe took place over Turkey.
Turkey, yep. You're right.
This was a different one. Well, so Margie, now when you use remote viewing for these investigations, what kind of information have you been receiving when it comes to some of these sightings? I know when the CIA and the military actually conducted such experiments when it came to UFOs, they received some very interesting results.
Yes, I think the most interesting thing I've seen. What I do when I do an investigation is use remote viewing as a secondary confirmation that something happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll usually see a scene of an event, and I'll know exactly what happened. And sometimes I'll know it before the witness tells me about it. So then I know that they are being truthful about their experience.
Mm.
But of course, I never tell them what I'm doing. Then I think where the strangest things that happened was one witness was telling me about this event, so I went home and I thought, well, I'm going to remote view this and see what happened. And I end up standing on a spacecraft of some type. It was all silver on the inside, and there was a table across the room, and there were 3 ETs standing around this table, and the one had his back to me. He turned around and looked me straight in the eyes. So this was a past event. So I had traveled back in time to watch an event. I was in my etheric body, and he knew it. So the ETs knew it, and he was not threatened at all. He just turned around and went about his work. It was very bizarre.
Well, it sounds very reminiscent. I don't know if you've had a chance yet to read Whitley Strieber's newest book. I think it's the title is A New World. If you haven't, I highly recommend that you read that, because some of his experiences that he talks about very similar to the ones that you had when you asked for help. So it's yeah, and
I will.
Yeah, it's in fact, I highly recommend that anybody read it, and hopefully, Tim, we can maybe try to get Whitley on our show sometimes to talk about his new book.
Oh, indeed, yeah, he hasn't done it in a while. So
he's been on before, but
yeah.
And Margie, when you talked about the being who realized that you were there when you were remote viewing the past, that sounds an awful lot like, and coax my memory here, Tim, the famous remote viewer who traveled to Jupiter first ahead of the spacecraft.
Oh, you mean the fellow that used to come to our meetings here in
the artist.
New York, John Keel. Yeah, the John Keel's the friend.
Right, my name. His name is just completely naturally trying to remember what his name is. I can't think of it right now. But this gentleman had said the same thing when he was tasked to check on the dark side of the moon. He said that he realized that the alien presence that was there was very well aware that he was there watching them, and apparently they didn't like it. And he also said that later, when he was at a supermarket, he saw a woman that was rather dressed rather flashy, and he knew right away that she was an alien, and he was warned then later on, I guess by his handlers, that he had to try to stay on the down low, so to speak, with these abilities, because if these beings, whatever they are, sense that he could sense them, that they would make life a little difficult for him.
Well, I've seen some non-human beings walking on the planet that look close to being human beings. They pass for them, but I know when they're not. And in fact, one was at a UFO conference, and then he disappeared shortly after. He was gone. He didn't stay. So they know when I know. They pick that up.
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes you wonder if we're dealing with like a myriad of different types of beings, some that are, actually physical like us, others that are able to be both physical and non-physical, and then others that are, for want of a better word, interdimensional and can, pop in and out at a moment's notice. I mean, have you gotten any impressions along those lines yourself?
Absolutely. In fact, I think most of them are fifth dimensional, and I think there's many, many thousands going on at the same time. I don't know if you've heard of the fast movers. I'm writing a book about them right now, along with 2 other gentlemen, and we have obtained video and then gone through the video frame by frame to see these very, very fast-moving objects at 8,000 miles per hour plus. So we could, been able to figure that out by checking the location and the distance and the frames in the video. And I have the ability to see them with the naked eye. If I'm driving or outside, I can kind of go into just a little light trance state, and I see them. And there's more and more now. I mean, I've seen them my whole life, but in the past couple of years, even the past 6 months, it's escalated. So there's just so many different types, and I think they are interdimensional, and they're going in and out of dimension, and they move so fast that normally humans don't notice them.
Now you talk about objects flying in the sky?
Yes,
okay.
But also the beings themselves. They have the ability to, if somebody notices them, say in their house, they'll be in one place 1 second and another place another second, where it would be too fast for a human to get to that space. So I think that they are moving at a much faster level, and they're in a higher vibration than we are.
Now, I also wanted to give you the chance before the show ends, I guess, that you have a remote viewing is a workshop coming up in March?
Yes, it's a full-day workshop on March 14th in Kansas City, and I'm going to be gearing this one towards people who are paranormal and UFO investigators, although it's appropriate for anybody. And I use my workbook along with it, and by the end of the workshop, the person will have all the skills they need and all of the training methods that will get them to the point, if they practice it, that within a year they should be remote viewing. And some people are much faster. Some people are actually doing it the day of the workshop. And, I just train them to open their psychic center or their psi center, which is the area that remote viewing occurs in. And so they'll increase their psychic abilities as well with that. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And then we have a conference coming up in May 15th and 16th. It's the Mysteries of the Universe Conference, and that's in Kansas City. And our keynote speaker is Ian Punnett. So that's
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That website is oz-ufo.com, and the remote viewing site is my site, margiekay.com.
All right. Well, we got about 5 minutes before the show ends, so I wanted you to talk a little bit about the UFO activity that was going on in June of last year. Oh,
yes. Yes, I'm going to talk about this at the conference in depth, but it was we call it the June 20th mass sightings. Thousands of people saw these 3 large white objects hovering over the city for over 6 hours. So they're calling all the TV stations, news stations, and MUFON, trying to figure this out. But what happened was we got some really good video of the objects that we were able to have our video analyst do. He's here in Kansas City. He's been a great help to us, and he took them apart frame by frame. Well, you see these 3 objects, which, by the way, the same day this is going on, that afternoon, DARPA released a statement, just coincidentally, that they had released these high-tech weather balloons from the East Coast. Okay? So they didn't say anything about what's going on in Kansas City. They just said, we released these a couple of days ago. Okay. So anyway, they fly, or they are up, way up, at 75,000 feet or higher. These objects in Kansas City were at 2,900 feet. And they were 8.5 feet in diameter. So the weird thing was, in each of these videos, there were also other objects flying around these objects. They were clearly craft of some type, but they were flying at approximately 8,000 miles an hour. So I do not think that those objects were the weather balloons. But if they were, for some reason, that they floated down and they were just hovering around, even though the prevailing winds were actually going from west to east and not east to west, let's say they were weather balloons, these other objects definitely were not. And they were not something of ours, flying around them and that close together.
Interesting, and I know that there was other locations around the country that were having similar sightings within the same time frame.
Yep, St. Louis had some, and there were some on the East Coast.
All right. Well, we are rapidly approaching the end of the show, Tim. So, Margie, you're the author of the Kansas City UFO Flap. Where can people find that?
Get it on Amazon.
All right. What about your others? Gateway to the Dead and Haunted Independence? Are those on Independence? All right.
MargieKay.com
or Amazon.com.
All right. Fantastic.
Yeah, I want to read the one about the UFO flap, and don't forget our own books that we've just published recently, Tim. UFOs Deja Vu and Tim Swartz's Incredible Alien Encounters. The book that weighs over 5 pounds. 500.
Oh my!
500. It's the size of what the New York City telephone directory used to be. That's how many reports are in there. And of course, our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO's Secret Files, that I'm sure I think over the weekend Peter will be adding a couple of new episodes, and of course the archives here on KCORradio.com. And good evening to one and all. Good night, Tim. Good night, Marge. Good night, Tina. Good night, Helen. Good night, Peter. Good night, Carol. Good night, one and all.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.